Thank you very much. And hi, everyone. So my name is Donal Griffin. I am the Fair Seas Campaign Coordinator, and I am delighted and privileged to be here today in Bodø and speaking to you all. I want to thank Mark and the whole MPA Europe crew for inviting me and having me speak. And I'm going to speak today, the title of my presentation is Ireland's Fair Seas, Building a Movement of Ocean Stewardship. And basically I'll go through the work of Fair Seas and also, I guess, the progress, Ireland's progress from our perspective on achieving our 30 by 30 goals and targets. But first, a little bit more about me. So I'm a marine biologist by training. I finished my doctorate in 2019. I was looking at the trophic relevance of fish and jellyfish interactions in the Irish Sea. I then went in shortly after, fell into the role of marine policy, legislation, and then advocacy and campaigning, a role that I'm kind of still in now. I come from County Tyrone, which is a little county in the north of Ireland, not on the coast. That's where I grew up pretty much. My mum's from. My dad is from the southwest in County Kerry, right on the coast. And I was actually down visiting there last week, which was lovely. And I have two kids at home, Patsy and Ashley. And I'm married, and thank you to Kim for looking after the kids and allowing me to be here. So that's a little bit more about myself and a little bit more about Fair Seas. So we are a coalition of Ireland's leading NGOs, environmental non-governmental organisations, and also networks. And you can see some of our partners there. And Eva is here today from the Irish Whale Dolphin Group, which is great to have some representation from our partners. And our ambition or vision, I suppose, is to see Ireland become a leader in marine protection and marine protected areas, giving our species, habitats, and really importantly, our coastal communities the opportunity to thrive. And we are also very lucky to, over the past 4 years, we're about 4 years old as a campaign project, to be funded by Oceans 5 and Blue Nature Alliance, both of which were mentioned yesterday on the MPA funding panel discussion, also from the Beck Foundation and the Weiss Foundation. So we're a coalition of partners working on MPAs. We also have a coalition of funders that allow us to work on MPAs, which is great. And we made this video about 3.5 years ago at the very beginning of Fair Seas. It's just 2 minutes. It might sum up in maybe a better way than I can what we're about. So I'll just play this now if it works.
Hello, Ireland. It's me, your sea.
Glory.
Remember that summer holiday? We were so small, we tried to jump over the waves and squeal like chased at the beach. Or that day when we cycled an hour just to sit and look out at the shore and the birds, it helped you relax. Normally I'm quite modest, but the water, plants, fish, birds, whales, and sharks, they're all part of me. I help support all kinds of life in an area 7 times bigger than Ireland. But we've been struggling. We've been under pressure for a long time because of things like industrial activity and pollution. In fact, 65% of our coastal habitats are not healthy. Now, we need your help. Healthy seas means healthy people. There's a group called Fair Seas who have this goal to bring people together to conserve and slowly all the biodiversity I support. We want to give our species habitats and coastal communities the opportunity to thrive. This means giving special areas, new marine protected areas that free from damaging activity. To give us a chance to kind of have, Fair Seas wants to increase marine protected areas from 2% to 30% by 2030. Then I can do my part. I'll store carbon, fight climate change, restore habitats and species, feed life, and support livelihoods. What do you say? Love, mercy.
So yeah, I think that puts it quite nicely what we're all about as a campaigning coalition of NGOs. And this is just kind of a bit like the talk yesterday. I'm going to give my conclusions first and work my way back. The main points today from my talk, the next 30 minutes or so, Ireland's marine area is enormous. Its stewardship by successive governments in our perspective, from our perspective, has failed to deliver its full ecological, economic or social potential, a lot of what we've talked about here today already. And I was really glad to hear a few of other contributors this morning talk about the quantity and quality of MPAs. It's something I talk about quite a lot. And from our view, the quantity and quality of Ireland's current MPA network is poor, and we believe a transformational change is needed. And on that front, the Irish government at the moment is drafting new marine protected area legislation, kind of as we speak. So it is an exciting moment for Irish marine conservation. I would say that we're not as far along down that road as we would like, but it is certainly a formative time when it comes to Ireland and how shaping and guiding how marine conservation and marine protected areas will be rolled out now for generations, I believe, with new national law. And then towards the end, I'll speak a little bit about Fair Sea's approach to affecting change and building a movement of ocean stewardship and how exactly we kind of strategize to go about that. And then I'll just give some reflections then at the end on the question, is Ireland on its way to achieving 30 by 30 target? And spoiler alert now, I think the answer is yes, but I have some reservations there. People have heard me say that before, I think. And I suppose the biggest reservation now is time as 2030 rapidly approaches. So this is the real map of Ireland, and kind of is quite visually stunning, I think. This was a map produced by the Marine Institute a long time ago. Ireland's marine territory is 7 times the size of Ireland's landmass, so it's huge. Over 880,000 kilometres squared, and includes, of course, territorial waters, the EEZ, parts of the continental shelf. And someone described at a conference I was at a few years ago in Cork as Ireland being a lion, and I'd never really heard that term before, but a large island ocean nation. And I really quite like that, because we should view ourselves in Ireland as a large island ocean nation. And I suppose the main point from this slide is that Ireland has a vast duty and a responsibility to look after this vast marine area. And in terms of MPAs and the role of MPAs in looking after that vast marine area, Ireland has committed to protecting 30% of its waters by 2030, a 30 by 30 target, which is great. It's done this at a national level, it's done this at a European level, it's done this at a global level as well. And most recently, our Taoiseach, so that's Ireland's Prime Minister equivalent, you might say, restated Ireland's commitment at the United Nations Ocean Conference in France last month to 30 by 30, Ireland committing or achieving 30 by 30. It was a few weeks before that, European Maritime Day was on in County Cork in the south of Ireland. Some of you may indeed have been there. Again, the Taoiseach was there and made that commitment to 30 by 30. But then also at European level through the EU Ocean Pact, it's in there. The EU Biodiversity Strategy, those targets are in there. The Kunming-Montreal Agreement, those targets are in there, all of which Ireland has signed up to in one way or another. So it's very clear where the Irish government want to go with this in terms of MPAs and the targets. But what's the reality of things? And again, I'll talk a lot, you hear me talking a lot about quantity and quality of Ireland's MPAs. So at the moment, Ireland's MPA network consists primarily of Natura 2000 sites. They're SACs and SPAs under EU law, as you know. We have about 9% of Irish waters designated due to a few new designations in the past few years. So just, some people say it's just under 10, so it's over 9. It's 9 or 10%. And as 2019, 2020, we had 2.3% of our waters designated. So we were really at the very bottom. I think we were second to last on the EU ranking tables at that stage. We're a little bit moved up now. We're up to 9%, which is progress, brilliant process. Progress in terms of quantity. And you can see from the map on the right, those 2 big green blocks. There are new additional SACs in the northwest and the south coast. There's also been some additional SPAs and extensions to SPAs as well over the last few years. So there is progress on that front, and we have welcomed that. However, in terms of quality then, which is, of course, as we've been discussing, very important, more important than quantity, I think some of the speakers were arguing earlier. In terms of the implementation of those site-specific conservation objectives, management plans, conservation measures, they're lacking pretty much across the board. So we are not good at managing our current sites. I think that's probably a bit of an understatement. We're actually so bad at it that the EU Commission took Ireland to court a few years ago on our failure to implement the Natura 2000 sites. And the judgment came in 2023 in favour of the Commission, stating that Ireland had systematically failed to introduce appropriate conservation measures into our Natura 2000 network. So I think the writing's on the wall there. I mean, that's nothing new to anyone in Ireland, I don't think. It's not about, kind of lamenting that we haven't done a good job so far. It's about, okay, well, what do we do next to make sure we do better? And in terms of doing better, I think it's clear that we need a paradigm shift in how we designate and implement MPAs in Ireland. Our current suite and also our new MPAs that we may get in the future as well. And on that front then, so how is Ireland planning to meet its 30 by 30 MPA commitments? So we have a new government in Ireland from January, February this year, but the previous government that was in place for the previous 5 years, they had committed to new marine protected area legislation, so that's new national legislation to meet the 30 by 30 target. That was the plan. However, there was an election in November last year. New government was formed earlier this year, and that legislation never made it through the books, essentially. But the new government, as I said, have committed to MPAs, and in their programme for government, which is their, I suppose, Bible of what they are committing to do in their term over the next 5 years, they said they committed to reviewing and strengthening conservation measures for marine ecosystems and wildlife. Okay, that's good. It's fairly vague, but certainly improvement of our Natura 2000 sites would fall under that commitment. We will also expand marine protected areas and establish wildlife sanctuaries. Okay, fairly vague again, actually. No mention specifically of the legislation, but certainly that expansion of MPAs is detailed there and would fall. New national legislation as a means to expand our MPA network would fall under that commitment as well. So I suppose the question remains then, will passing of new MPA law legislation and achieving 30 by 30 targets be priorities for the new government coalition? Will they be a genuine priority? And that's a question that remains to be seen, I think. And then, so talking about the timeline for Ireland's new MPA legislation. So this has actually been in the books now, or in the works for quite a while. Back in 2020, well, it was before 2020 where the government set up an independent MPA advisory group, published, and they went on then in 2020 and published a report called Expanding Ireland's MPA Network. And that was a fantastic report, 300-400 pages long. It was like a guidance document for the government, to guide them in what are the possibilities of expanding Ireland's MPAs. In 2022, there was a general scheme for the proposed MPA bill was published. So that's one of the very early first steps in drafting new legislation in Ireland. A general scheme I liken it to a fleshed out contents page. We were delighted when that was published. We fed in then to the review of that, or the consultation of that, which took place early in 2023. It underwent pre-legislative scrutiny by the Joint Oireachtas Committee, so a scrutiny committee in Irish Parliament, essentially. And there was a report published then. We fed into that, and it was 45 recommendations about how the MPA bill and law should be progressed and could be improved in Ireland. And that's essentially when there was a flurry of activity at that time. We were all very excited, in Fair Seas especially, as you can imagine. And we were hopeful at that stage that the legislation would be passed, potentially even later that year, in 2023, but certainly within a year. But then that didn't transpire, essentially. We're now mid-2025, and there still has been no public process on that, public progress on the publishing of that bill, which would be the first big step then to enacting it into law. And the current government now, they're still kind of finding their feet, actually, 7 months in, but they're exploring the feasibility now of MPA legislation via an amendment route to marine spatial planning law in Ireland just speed up the delivery of effective MPAs. So that's why this conference is so, I suppose, relevant for me today, to learn from you all and that intersection between MPAs and MSP, which, as we all know, and why we're here, is so important. And another, I suppose, while all that legislative progress was being made, there was another really exciting thing that happened in Ireland. That was the new Marine Protected Areas LIFE project that was announced, launched last year. This is Senator Noonan, now then Minister Noonan, that launched that. And I know Oliver O'Kayla from Ireland here is going to give probably an update on that tomorrow. But this is just some text taken from the website. The new MPA LIFE project involves a 25 million investment, which will be used to research and develop a comprehensive network of MPAs in line with international best practice. That's fantastic. This will ensure a robust and meaningful process for the designation and management of MPAs in Ireland. That's brilliant. That's what we want to hear. And the MPA LIFE project is set up to span 9 years. It's set up to span 9 years up to 2033. So kind of in those short couple of paragraphs addresses some of the issues that we've been talking about, in terms of the timing, the timeframes of projects and initiatives. 9 years is chunky. It's probably the longest kind of time frame for a project you'll get. It addresses the importance of robust designation, but also the management. And it also addresses the importance of the research and international best practice. So it's hitting a lot of buttons there just in those couple of paragraphs. So kind of where are we now then? I suppose taking that all in together. So there's been no progress in the MPA bill since February 2023. We have additional 20% MPA designations to make in the next 5 years. That's a lot. It's a big, that's a big ask. That's a really big ask, I think. It's becoming bigger by the day. The EU MPA LIFE project to implement the legislation, essentially an implementing arm, is the way I see it at least, of the new legislation when we get it, which I think is fantastic in terms of capacity, resources, and everything else. The commitment to expand MPAs in the programme for government, but not the legislation itself, okay. We know that, but we have those commitments in other ways. So that's good at least. There's a reorganisation now of MPA powers between government departments and the new government. So that is ongoing and may finish soon. The Taoiseach has restated his commitment to 30 by 30 and MPA legislation in France as well as Cork. The Taoiseach was over in France to help the Commission in that launch the EU Ocean Pact. That the Ocean Pact published stating, the necessity of effective MPAs. It actually said on the small section devoted to MPAs in the Ocean Pact, it actually says a lot of the things that we've been saying all along about the importance of stakeholder engagement, the importance of management along with designation, the importance of best, evidence-driven, data-driven, progress. So, that we took that as encouraging, that we were on the right track, I suppose. And we were backed by that EU Ocean Pact in terms of when we make that argument to nationally. And I think we are hopeful MPA legislation will be progressed soon. Like I've been saying that for the past 4 years, so maybe don't take my word for it. But I think we're getting there, and I think it's important that we do it right, as opposed to just doing it for the sake of brevity or expedience. So I think there's a lot to be hopeful about, actually. And that kind of brings us to where, I suppose, how do Fair Seas contribute, or how do Fair Seas as an ENGO coalition aim to contribute? And one of the strands in which we aim to do that is by publishing scientific, data-driven reports. The very first report was Revitalising Our Seas, so identifying areas of interest for marine protected area designation in Irish waters. We published in 2022. I kind of see it as like a mini version of the MPA Europe project, because we took lots of data, all the data that we had available to ourselves as ENGOs, not as a department or state agency or anything, but we gathered that up and then we just highlighted the areas, I suppose, that we found to be ecologically, significant. Areas that are species rich, species abundant, biodiverse, all these things. And we said, these are areas that we need to look at. when we start to think about MPA designation. And we drew lines on maps, and like for NGO sector, that's not always, it's a big, I feel like it's a brave decision. It's certainly a big decision. There is the opportunity then for lots of pushback, which we didn't get overly, I don't think. I thought it was very well received, actually, or that report, and actually kind of really jump-started the conversation in Ireland about MPAs as well, in a way that a similar report that didn't draw lines and maps maybe would not have. We also then, the next year, we carried out an ocean literacy survey, so we published our report on that, ocean literacy and coastal connections in Ireland, and that was to really dig deeper into not so much the ecological science, species, habitats, ecosystems, but to get to people's values and perspectives of the sea, which I thought was really interesting. We then published a report, Sustainably Financing Ireland's MPA Network, and again, very relevant to the conversation yesterday. And that was really good, I think, because it kind of showed that, we talk about investment and stuff, like with a relatively small amount of investment, you're taking a huge step towards protecting your seas, restoring your seas, and having healthy, happy seas, as I sometimes call them. There was a range. It also depends, of course, exactly how the Irish government will go about implementing their MPAs. We haven't seen the legislation yet. We don't know exactly how it will happen. But, we know some things. So we kind of had estimates of what the cost may be. And 55 million was the median average cost that we kind of came up with in terms of what it would cost from then 2024 to 2030. So in the case of 6 or 7 years, absolute, a bargain is from our perspective, especially from a country, Ireland, at the minute, which is, is flush with money. And 55 million is very reasonable. And especially considering as well that the MPA Life project is worth 25 million, and that's we're halfway there almost already in terms of investment in MPAs over the next 6, 7, 8 years. And then our most recent report, or most recent chunkiest report, a climate resilient path for Ireland's MPA network, and the talk before the break was fantastic. Very similar to our report, we partnered with the Plymouth Marine Laboratory in the UK to look at exactly what was described earlier by Jorge, where in Ireland's waters can we protect now that will also be useful in the future, depending on for biodiversity, given the potential impact of various degrees of global warming. So a really important piece of work there too. And again, we use these reports or hopefully they contribute usefully to the conversation, to decision making, and arm people with the information that they need when they go to the stakeholder meetings that we've just talked about that are so important. But also we use them as an advocacy tool, of course, as a campaign. And that advocacy piece is a big part of what Fair Seas does. Political advocacy is a big part of what we do. It's one of our biggest strands of our work and activities. So engaging with politicians, and individually engaging with the political parties. We attend their annual conventions or Adeshna in Ireland each autumn time. We speak with the government, we speak with the opposition. We're non-party political in that sense. We do all we can, I suppose, to raise awareness and raise the level of debate, not just in the public, but in the Oireachtas or Ireland's Parliament, and amongst TDs and senators as well. And we think we've been fairly successful at that. And ultimately, I suppose, one of the aims of that strand of work is to ensure that MPAs and marine conservation more generally is a really high priority. In where the decisions are made and where the power lies in Ireland. We also advocate internationally as well. So some of the team were in France earlier this year. We were in Lisbon a few years ago at the United Nations Ocean Conferences. We were at Impact 5 in Vancouver a few years ago, which is a fantastic event as well. And we find, there was talk earlier about the bottom-up approach, and I'll get on to our bottom-up work in a second. And that, the top-down, even at national level, I think is needed as well. and even that top-down international perspective is really important. We use that international advocacy to put pressure on nationally and even at times locally to get things done, I suppose. So we found that very useful in the start. It's not about, we like to cover all our bases. We work that international level to an extent. We work primarily at that national level as a national campaign, and then we also work at that a local level. And that is, I kind of was saying earlier to my colleague Lisa, the local work and the local work we do in the community is the most rewarding. I suppose hearing from local communities and people what they're doing and how they don't wait on the government in a lot of these local communities. They bandy together similar-minded people that have an interest in protecting the environment. They start a WhatsApp group. It's all it takes these days. It's just to get a WhatsApp group together, and you'll be amazed what can happen in a very short period of time. WhatsApp is the biggest conservation tool we have in some strange ways, I feel like sometimes. So we host events in local communities. We attend events that are being put on by others in local communities. We've also, with our partners, the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group, we've done a survey of coastal or areas of interest that we identified in our reports. We did a survey of our coastal areas of interest on their research sailing vessel. And we used that to engage in coastal communities along the west coast and the south coast. We also made, I don't have it here, but we also made 3 short documentary films. So they're using the community voice method approach to I guess, storytelling and interviewing. We went into 3 separate coastal communities in Ireland. We interviewed a range of stakeholders regarding it, the MPAs and RCs more generally, people from dive clubs, fishermen and women, people in the seafood sector, ecotourism sector, local businesses, small local businesses, these sorts of things. We all ask them the same set of questions, like, what do you think of MPAs? What do you think of RCs? Do you think RCs are healthy? What can be done? We all ask them the same set of questions, and then we kind of stitch that together in a short film there, 15-minute film. And that's brilliant in itself, that process, really getting to deep dive into engaging with coastal communities. It also has the added benefit that you have the film afterwards, in which you can then go back into those communities and do what we have done very successfully, I think, is screen those short films back to the community, including the people that were in them, and then provoke a wider conversation then in the local community about MPAs. So we found that really, really effective, actually, and really enjoyable. And this is the most recent version of that. This was at the end of May, I think, or start of June. We were down in a little fishing village in the southeast coast of Ireland, off Wexford. And we had a seagrass tour. Our partner in the area, Coastwatch, who's one of the Fair Seas partners, kind of organised a seagrass meadow tour, like a rocky shore tour as well, in the afternoon. And then later that evening, we got together, and you can see that we had a screening of the film that we had made in that area, and we engaged with the local communities. And it was very much, I suppose, we try not to stand at lecterns in those rooms, like I'm doing now. We try to promote the conversation amongst, or stimulate a conversation or facilitate a conversation, whatever words you like, amongst the local communities there themselves. Because again, we are aware and very aware that we're not a local community group, we're a national group. But I think we still have something to contribute there. So there should be another quick video here of just the seagrass tour that I thought I would show, which I thought was great. And this is Karine Dubsky of Coastwatch that led the seagrass tour on the day.
Today was really exciting. We went out to Keynote, really good crowd, different backgrounds, turned out for the field trip, and we went to Stewardship and the was on route. So the seagrass had just disappeared at St. Patrick's Bridge under the water. But almost everybody went out to still see it, waded out, was mesmerized by its interesting beauty. Few fish shooting around, these big silver things, where animals come to molds and bones, to lay eggs. And I think this bringing communities together. And we really good turnout today. Unfortunately, we want to fishermen. but there were some who used to be internet, and their knowledge was really contributing as well. The most important was we need people to see that it works in other areas. And there were some very important questions on monitoring and enforcement. So all our countries, brilliant.
Yes, that's really, I really like that video. Karine is an amazing, she's an inspiration. She's a fantastic ocean advocate. That was a really successful, like it kind of shows you the real, I guess, positive kind of perspective that we try to bring to those engagements on the coast. And then also we have, I suppose, protested outside the Dáil Irish Parliament as well. That was last September. We were calling for action on the MPA legislation, and maybe we're back there again this September, and that's fine. We'll keep showing up as long as we need to. And as you say, lots of happy faces, lots of colour, lots of young people, lots of different groups, researchers. We have some politicians there as well. It was a really fantastic afternoon, and I think more than anything showed the love or the gra, as we say in Ireland, for our seas, and like the real appetite that there is to protect them. Just simple, just we're getting in the weeds of all the conversations, of course, as we would at a conference. But for these people and for this day, it was just about let's just do something, to help our seas. Essentially, that was it. I think that sums it up. A great day. And then in terms of, I suppose, building, to come back to this sense of us building a movement of ocean stewardship. 1 minute, okay, thank you. We do a bit of everything, and I'll skip over this slide very quickly. But it's a holistic approach, and we have to feel like we have to do a bit of everything, because from videos to consultations to letters to political engagements, it takes a bit of everything to truly kind of move and build that. How would you say that ocean stewardship feeling or purpose in Ireland? So very quickly, because I have a minute left, so just to reflect on the idea or the question, is Ireland on its way to achieving 30% MPAs by 2030? As I said earlier, I think the answer is yes. We've never been in a better position to achieve our 30 by 30 commitments, and very quickly. The current government committed to MPAs 30 by 30. The new legislation is forthcoming, as I've said. The EU MPA Life project launched and up and going. Huge public support for this in Ireland. And because we're a bit further behind in terms of that national MPA process and legislation, we have the opportunity to learn lessons from other countries. But in reflecting back on the quantity-quality argument, is Ireland on its way to effectively protecting 30% of its seas by 2030? Right, okay, we're a bit more specific with that question. We don't know yet. Because despite all that positive momentum, which I'm positive about, the reality is the content and the timeframes of the new legislation are still unknown. Hopefully we'll find out soon on both cases, but they're still unknown to us at the moment. The implementation of a new act takes time, and 2030 is fast approaching. We're starting from a low base. Yes, that gives us the opportunity to learn lessons, but we have a further road to travel. And there's an increasing demand for sea space. Ireland also has very large offshore renewable energy targets for 2030 as well, which we have to, of course, be mindful of. But I still think it's true to say Ireland has never been in a better position to live up to the letter and the spirit of its 30 by 30 commitments to protect nature at sea. So I choose to be ocean optimistic about this. I think Ireland has a real opportunity now to do some amazing things over the next few years, and it's Fair Sea's role, and as I view it as my role and responsibility to make sure that happens, I suppose. So thank you very much for listening. Tusen takk and Gormila Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this update on progress. And I think you can, is a positive one.
Yeah.
Hopefully the audience agree. And we will find out.
Yeah.
Time to the audience. Any questions for Donal, please?
Hello, Sebastian, Norwegian Institute for Water Research. How do you receive the concept of multi-use in combination with MPAs?
Yeah, I think, Ireland's current suite of MPAs are multi-use, but I don't really know what that means so much in the framework of our management or implementation of those sites being so poor at the moment. So there's no management, really active management going on there across, not completely, but pretty much the majority of sites. So in terms of the new legislation, the reality of it is it depends what is in the legislation in terms of multi-use, in terms of minimally, lightly, highly, fully protected. What we have been calling for is 10% strictly protected, as in line with the EU and stuff, and then the rest then being a variety of multi-use that are highly protected ideally, and yeah, working our way down. So it's about, I suppose, the compromises we were talking about earlier. You need to involve stakeholders. You need the data-driven scientific evidence to show where the best benefit of these sites will go. But then you also need to bring in those other really important layers, as you described earlier, about stakeholders. And that's where I think where that multi-use element for some sites that it's appropriate for may come into play and be really important. But at the end of the day, an MPA still needs to be effective in protecting the features and qualifying interests of that it's set out to protect. So there's a bit of jiggery pokery, I think, to be done there. But at the end of the day, MPAs need to be effective, as we've all heard.
Thank you, John. I see there's a gentleman here with a question.
Thanks, Jean-Luc, the Marine Foundation again. You mentioned a complaint in the European Commission about Ireland's lack of progress. Does it follow up on those complaints, or was it a one-hit situation, so to speak? Or do they reflect on what you're achieving yearly and report back?
I'm not sure on the answer to that, if I'm completely honest. It may be from orbit, at least as far as we're aware, it's more of a one-hit thing, as you say. We met the commissioner in European Maritime Day down in Cork, Commissioner Costas, and he wasn't aware of that that ruling. So he said he would follow it up for us. We've chased him up about it since. But I believe that there is work ongoing there to rectify those issues. And even at the time, Ireland put forward a defence that they had done lots and were doing lots to rectify kind of the poor management of our Natura 2000 sites in the meantime, and since even in between the time when the case was first brought forward and it was ruled upon. So there is work going on. Like I don't diminish that work at all. And I want to see it, and I love to see it happening. But it's about a question overall: are they delivering? I mean, talk to the effectiveness point again. Are those sites delivering for the qualifying interest and the features for which they're designed at the moment? And I think across the board, the answer to that is no, or the evidence at least is leading us to believe that it's no at the moment.
Any more questions from the group?
Thank you. I'm a bit bummed you didn't call me gentleman. Well, everyone will be interested in research.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for a very nice story. And it seems like there's a lot of momentum in your work. So I have one really condensed question, and that is Ireland is EU, right? And how do you deal with other EU stakeholders? Because it sounds like you are this process is like autonomous at this stage. But what about the EU fleet that has traditional training and traditional rights to these sites and so on and so on?
Yeah, and that's going to be a big issue to grapple with, as it is for all EU member states with large ocean areas. So I think the new national legislation will deal with that to an extent, or at least sync up with, I guess, what was mentioned earlier by Barbara. I think those joint recommendation tools that we have in the common fisheries policy. But it's not easy, and we know there hasn't been many or any successful joint recommendations brought forward, at least in Ireland, let's say, to date on that front. So that is going to be a real issue, I think. There is hope in the contents of the nature restoration law, which puts some timeframes on the advancing of joint recommendations under Article 11, is it? So there's no easy answer to that, and I certainly don't have it. And I won't pretend to have it. But if we're designating more big, sites offshore, which we likely will do, I think we need to make sure that they're managed. And one of the biggest pressures, obviously offshore as well as maybe inshore, is fishing. So there needs to be a mechanism there. Now, obviously, national law can't overwrite EU law, so they need to dovetail in some way, and that's what we've been calling for. But the specifics of that, it'll take a better person than me to figure out, to be honest.